we let the kids get out there and help break up the soil, but we already had some things in place. We had the raised beds already there, we had the soil there, we had the seeds purchased. So there's some things that you need to do in anticipation of getting started in August. And so that's why we wanted to have the workshop now rather than waiting till school started back, because we wouldn't have time to get that in place. 4 things that helped us get off to a good start was planning ahead and having those beds already there, like I said. And year before last, we tried a raised bed, and it was on the playground side of our school, which was very shady. And we didn't see nearly the success that we did this year when we moved to the other side of the school where it gets a lot more sunlight. So start looking around your house to see where you get the most sun, and that might be a good place to put your bed. Have your soil ready and have those seeds that you want to plant ordered. One thing Kathy found out is that some seed that's very popular and maybe it's a little bit more scarce runs out. And so if you want certain varieties of plants, you may want to make sure you're ordering early. And then be ready in August to get those seeds in the ground. Now, Kathy Raymeyer, who I'm thrilled to have here with us because she's very, I want to say, famous in the gardening world. She is an expert in the fall and winter gardening. She's spoken across the state at many different events, and so I'm so thankful that she will come and give her time to teach us here at Pikeville Elementary.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And I'm really happy to be here because this is frankly a highlight of my professional career, to be able to work with the school in this way and expand on school gardens in the way that we've done. Tracy has introduced me as Dr. Kathy Raymeyer. Please just call me Kathy. Understand also that, like many teachers, I've got a very similar background, even though I teach at a medical school now and I'm a garden writer as well. For about 7 years, I taught in the public schools. Back in the 1990s, I was a high school teacher. And so I know a lot about the challenges that you go through with time and just management of students and those types of things. And to be honest with you, I would have never have thought to have had a school garden at that time, just simply because, you know, at that time all I thought about with growing things was, okay, well, I can only grow things in the summer months. You know, plant in spring, harvest during the summer, and then fall and winter I'm going to eat my canned goods and that kind of thing to go on. But getting introduced to Tracy and since, you know, in the meantime learning what I have about winter gardening, I realized that this is a real opportunity for schools. It kind of eliminates that problem with that summer maintenance that is such a challenge to teachers. And so I'm really happy to share what we've learned with fall and winter gardening in the schools and share specifically what I've learned with my history of fall and winter gardening. If you could advance this slide, Neil. Because a lot of times when we think of gardening in fall and winter, when we think of our gardens, we think of this on the slide, of, you know, frozen soil that's heaved up and plants that are frozen out there, and surely when those plants freeze, they're going to thaw. And so I took this picture in the middle of the polar vortex a couple of years ago, back when it got down to -8 degrees in my garden. If you could go to the next slide, you'll see that this is it the very next day. And so those plants were under the protection of low tunnels, which Tracy has mentioned before. And these are simple structures. You can see essentially what you're seeing there is PVC pipe. And with that particular tunnel, I had clear plastic. Just, you know, run-of-the-mill, 6 mil, you know, construction grade clear plastic that you can pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot, that kind of thing, over that. And so a big structure like that, which is about 5 by 40 feet in length and width, I could build for under $50. I didn't have to heat it, but yet all winter long I could harvest fresh produce from it. If you could go ahead and advance the slide. This was after 5 nights at either 0 or less. And you can see this is a harvest after that kind of chill. And it's pretty incredible. It's not just kale which I love kale, but it's more than that. There's a lot of diversity with fall and winter gardening. You can see there's kale, there's Swiss chard, there's different Asian greens there, carrots, turnips, various root crops. There's a lot of diversity in that picture. If you could go ahead and advance the slide. I had such success with it actually during the polar vortex that I decided, wow, I grow so much in my garden in the fall and winter months, and we need fresh food, then I'm going to offer it for sale to my local community, and so I offer a CSA. And this was during this year's winter storm that surpassed even the previous year's polar vortex, and you can see beautiful cabbage, gourmet salad greens, something called mosh, leeks, and then another salad mix that I offered in March, and it had been minus 14 Fahrenheit just 3 weeks prior to that. And so I just wanted to show these pictures here just to give you a taste of the variety and the freshness that you can get in the winter months, even without having any heat, without having some kind of expensive structure. If you could go ahead. So what are the essential elements for winter gardening? Well, for one, it's cold in the winter, right? And we all know that. And there's very little light in the winter months. And both of those things limit plant growth. Some plants do continue to grow during the winter months. Granted, they do it at a much slower rate. So really the keys to winter gardening is, one, selecting the right plants. And we're going to talk here in a second about what those are. What are those cold-tolerant plants that can do this? Secondly, it's planting those cold-tolerant plants way out in advance so they can get to a good size before all that serious cold and little light arrive. And so I'm just going to throw out a date here, and you can write this down. Mid-November, November 15th is kind of your target date that you want to shoot for here where we are in the eastern Kentucky mountains. Now, those of you that are at other latitudes, day length, the length of daylight during the winter months is going to vary by latitude, right? Oh, see all the extensions with science and math that we can get with this type of thing? But there are some really great calendars and graphs that you can link to on the web to find out what the target date is. But essentially, once sunlight is less than 10 hours a day, which happens here around November 15th, it's actually a little bit past that, but mid-November is kind of an area people can remember. That's about the time when daylight reaches less than 10 hours, and that's the most limiting factor for plant growth. So essentially, they're not going to get enough light to grow very fast. They'll continue to grow really slow, but they're not, even if it was warm, they wouldn't be growing very quickly. Okay, so that's number one.
We had a question too. Do you water the plants? Do you water your plants throughout the winter?
Okay.
Are there problems with freezing, that kind of stuff as you water?
Okay, so one of the questions that's come up from our remote viewers is, do I water the plants during winter? And are there problems with freezing water associated with that? Here's the beautiful thing about winter gardening, and this is a whole workshop all in of itself. But essentially, winter gardening is the easiest gardening you'll ever do. There's no watering. There's no weeding. There's no bugs. There's no disease. Because essentially, it's my kind of gardening, right? Because number one, the reason you have to water is, one, transpiration from the plants, evaporating that water. They're giving that off as part of their respiration. And two, just the evaporation from the soil surface, which is promoted by high temperatures. So one, in winter, I don't know if you've walked in your garden in winter compared to summer. It's like a sloshy, muddy mess out in winter compared to what is in summer. So essentially, even with the covers on, I have found that once serious cold weather, comes in, no watering. You might have to do some water getting the fall-winter garden established in August and September and October. You have to plant in advance. But once cold temperatures arrive, mid-November, no more watering. Same thing with weeding. Once those cold temperatures and low daylight arrive, no weeding, provided you've weeded in August and September. It's not like, some of the weeds will disappear because the cold will snap them. but those weeds will still be there. But if you've taken care of them in August, September, October, you're not going to have new ones that show up and just aggressively take over. Pretty much you've got 3 months of no weeding.
So you plant in August, September, October, and they get established, like mature a little bit, and then that's when you cover them as November 15th.
Exactly. So November 15th is what you're shooting for their maturity. So if you've ever looked at a seed packet, and it'll say on that seed packet, it takes 60 days to mature. And essentially what you want to do is go backwards from that November 15th date. And so you want to start planting things so where they're kind of reaching maturity. They're not quite at maturity, but they're kind of reaching maturity by November 15th. So for instance, if it's a 60-day to harvest plant, then you just count back from that. So November 15th, I'm going to count back to October. I want to get that in the ground by September 15th if I want to meet my window. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the first key. Is delaying the harvest is essentially what you're doing. You're getting plants pretty much close to maturity or where you want them to be. For instance, with my CSA, I like to sell baby leaf salads all winter long. And so I can plant salad mix in October, that late, but that's fine because I know it won't be till February that it's baby leaves. It's that slow.
By accident last year.
Yeah.
We planted the 3 beds. One got washed away, so we did a late seeding a bit, and I loved it because we had the mature plants and then we had the baby, and it's been smaller the whole time, which was nice because it's tender and
Right.
So staggering the plantings is a different size food.
Great, yeah, that's a great example of where sometimes when things don't work out as ideally as you wanted them to in a school garden, you still can make something great out of that. Those comparisons of, this is where we were starting with full-size plants, and here's where we planted later, and wow, look at the difference in taste and texture and so on. So the second important thing is crop protection, because these plants are cold tolerant, but they're not cold resistant. Okay, they can still die with extremely cold temperatures. And it's really not the cold temperatures per se that kill these cold tolerant plants. If you let a tomato out and frost gets on it, what happens to the cells with a tomato that's in frost is kind of akin to if you take your soda pop and you put it up in the freezer. What happens? It expands. Yeah, the water in that expands and it bursts the bottle. So that's what tomato plants do. They're a warm season crop. Cold tolerant crops, if you can go on to the next slide, cold tolerant crops have a way to get around that. They have adaptations that allow them to pump that water out of their cells so that way when that water freezes, it doesn't make the cells pop. Okay? So what you see on the left there in that picture are fava beans. These aren't garden beans, mind you. These are cold tolerant beans. Fava beans that in cold temperatures, it's 25 degrees that morning. And 25 degrees frost, and so they pumped water or allowed water to get out of their cells. And so what does the plant look like? It looks all wilted and desiccated. That's the same plants just a few hours later after the frost is burned off and it's warmed up above freezing. Look what they've done. They've just perked right back up. So this is the beauty of the adaptations of these cold tolerant plants. So they can withstand freezing by drying out. To a point, if we can go to the next slide. So to a point. So essentially what we want to do with the plants is give them a little bit of extra protection. We're going to grow them in tunnels to help them withstand that drying out. And I think of growing in tunnels kind of akin to if I want to put something in my freezer to protect it from freeze damage so I can eat it later and it tastes good. What do? Do I just take that hunk of meat and set it in the freezer? No, I put it into some kind of container that gets as much air out as I can, right? And I make sure it's got a good seal. And essentially what I'm trying to do there is maintain the humidity inside that. So that way, just from sublimation of water out of that meat, I can minimize that process happening. So it's kind of the same way with these low tunnels. You're giving them a little bit of extra protection so that you can slow that desiccation that's occurring. So we can grow over 30 types of vegetables in these low tunnels, provided that we get them in the ground early. And again, we want to use that mid-November target date for them to reach maturity. Okay? So, for instance, this is was my garden this past November, early November, and you can see it's chock full of stuff. And it's not because I'm feeding an army. Granted, I was planning on feeding 5 other families in addition to my own for my CSA, which is Community Supported Agriculture. People paid me a subscription to get veggies delivered every month. So I had a lot of stuff planted there. But why is it so chock full? It's so chock full because in a week or so, vegetable growth is going to slow down so much, it doesn't matter if I plant anything, nothing more is going to grow. Okay, so if you could go on. So what kind of things, can you click it again? My picture's missing. What kind of things can you grow? Well, there's a lot of things that don't just survive but thrive in cold. Right now, I'm growing broccoli in spring, and growing in broccoli in spring always makes me cry because I've grown it in fall before. And fall-grown broccoli, as you can see, this is November here, actually. There's no leaves on the trees back there in the back if you look. Those are the biggest broccoli crowns you'll ever grow is in fall because there's no bug pressure, believe it or not. You'd think there'd be more bugs at the end of the year, but, come September, October, those bugs, for the most part, they go away. But, things like we traditionally think of with the cold crops, not cold crops, even though that certainly fits. But those do great. So broccoli's one, even though there's some limits. Carrots, beets, lots of root crops, lots of leafy greens. And that's really, to me, the beauty of the fall-winter garden in schools. Is that it really introduces students to some leafy greens and root crops that many of them, have never tried before. If we grow summer school gardens, think about it. It doesn't take much to entice a child to taste a tomato. They've seen that. They know that. It doesn't take much to entice a child to eat sweet corn. They've seen that before. They know that. How about pak choy? Mustards. Turnips. Many of them have never seen those greens or root crops before. And yet we know those greens and root crops are the most important to health out there. And so it's really important that we promote that. And so that's a great thing about these types of gardens in schools, if you'll go on. Okay, so there's some variations, though, in frost and freeze tolerance. So there's frost tolerant, and that's what a lot of people have out in their gardens right now. Lettuce, peas, potatoes. Well, if a late frost hits, it's not going to be a big thing. So those are really popular right at the moment. Things for fall and winter garden, in addition to the lettuce, peas, potatoes, which eventually are going to croak after serious weather arrives in November, semi-hardy plants include broccoli, cabbage, or peony, and so on. And then the real hardy ones that go down to at least 20 F include the real champions like, kale and kohlrabi and turnips and so on. If you can go on to the next one. But I want to caution you that even with these, there are variations. And then also with those, when I have those minimum temperatures, it depends on whether or not they're covered with a structure. So just to give you an example, lettuce, theoretically, if we go by that chart there, should croak at 28 F, okay, or 26 F. But I grew lettuce through the winter, both years in my garden, no heat. Last year it got down to minus 14. Inside those low tunnels, they were unheated. There's nothing in there other than either clear plastic or a fabric row cover, which we're going to demonstrate here in a little bit, to keep any serious heat in there. So for instance, in the previous year's polar vortex, I know it got down to around, I think it was 12 in one of my lettuce beds. But why did they survive? Because they were protected and that freeze damage was minimized. So in the handouts that you all got, those of you in the live audience, and I think those of you at remote sites are going to have some type of directions to how to find this handout. But in this package of handouts, there's this planting dates card.
And right now, if you, those of you that are in the remote audience, if you've got the chat window open, you should have just received a link to Kathy's website that has that goes directly to this handout, so you can download that while we're talking about it.
Oh, great. Thank you. So this is something that I've put together, and this is based on several years of trial and error with a lot of different varieties. I'm one of those crazy people that can't have too many seeds, so I like to try out different things, even though I've only got a little bit of space. And so these are broken down by the vegetable type. You can see there's a lot of variety with fall winter vegetables that you can have in your garden all winter long. Recommended varieties are listed next, and I'm going to speak to those here in just a second. And then I've got it broken down by, okay, if you're going to just not use low tunnels at all, but you just want to grow stuff in the fall, maybe not protect it through January, February, then those are your target dates. That's what open is. And then if you're going to protect stuff in a low tunnel, then these are some later target dates that you can see for planting those things. So I just want to give you some examples. If you look at broccoli, for instance, you can see that in open, the latest that you can plant that, and ideally the latest that you can plant that in low tunnels as well, is in early August. Early August. Because what happens if you wait until mid-September to plant your broccoli, it's going to grow just fine, but it's not going to crown. It's not going to form that crown that you're going to want to harvest. And broccoli's not as cold tolerant as some of the other cold crops. And so it'll likely kick the bucket before it gets a chance to crown. Or if you put it under a low tunnel and it doesn't, if it overwinters into the following spring, oftentimes it'll start to form the crown, but it'll go ahead and bolt. It won't form a nice size crown that you want. So that's why those target dates are so important for things that head up. If you could go on to the next slide. So why does variety matter? Why have I got these recommended varieties? I just wanted to show you a couple of pictures. So carrots are incredibly cold tolerant. Most carrot tops will make it through the winter, and the carrot tops, the green parts, harden to about 18 F, okay, 18 Fahrenheit. Most types. Now I still grow carrots under low tunnels because I like to have those pretty tops, okay, and so that'll help preserve it. But you can see here's some carrots that were grown under the low tunnels, and after that the real bad cold that we had this year, the one on the left is a purple variety called Purple 68, and what's happened to those tops? They're withered and gone. But Napoli on the right is still looking good. Now the carrots down and under there were still edible, but still, if I'm selling for market, or if some kids might get in a school might get turned off by plants that have dead tops, right? Okay, if you could go on to the next one. Another one, an example, is cabbage. A lot of people think of cabbage as a spring planted crop that you harvest in summer. It is so much better planted in the end of summer and harvested in the fall and winter. And there's variation in cabbage varieties. So the smooth, heading type 1 on the right that you see there that my daughter is holding up like a flower, those typically, their cold tolerance only goes so far. Usually around 20 Fahrenheit, they're going to freeze inside that head. But the one on the left is a Savoy type that is an overwintering cabbage. And I had some of these that were uncovered even during this very bad cold storm. Well, when I say uncovered, the snow covered them. But they made it through that really bad minus 14 F temperatures that we had with the snow cover. The ones that I had under cover with no snow, just the cover on top, Those also made it, whereas the ones on the right I wouldn't have predicted those to make it. Okay? All right. Okay, great. So we're now going to talk a little bit about low tunnel construction and low tunnel management. And I'm going to bring out some materials that we used for these. And I'm going to open up this by telling you that we've changed it a little bit and how we've done it at the school in the 2 years that we've had a fall and winter garden. The first year, we had these pipes and used clear plastic. And this current year, even with colder temperatures, we went to a system where we moved away from clear plastic to a structure called GrowGuard. And some of you may know this material as Agribon. But we'll talk, I'll let maybe Tracy tell you a little bit about how those are set up and the advantages of using the GrowGuard versus the clear plastic in the school setting.
Last year we had been given some black pipe. I'm not sure what it's for. Kind of
Electrical
like
conduit roll
yes,
kind of thing.
And in the spring and when the weather is fine, it works great. But as soon as it gets cold, those just collapse. They fall over. So we went PVC this year, which worked much better. And the raised beds that we inherited from the high school, the students had drilled holes through the frame, our 2x12s, I guess they are. And so there were holes drilled, and they had rebar down in the wood to support it really strong. And then the concept was that the PVC pipe went over the rebar and then arched to the other side. And that worked great until our big snowstorm with the lots of weight of snow. What do we have? Over a foot of snow out there on those?
About 14 inches.
Yeah, he measured it.
16 inches officially in Pikeville.
Yeah.
So the rebar just broke out of the wood. The weight of the snow bent the rebar. It broke from the wood. So we're going to do it the way I do at home from now on. We're going to use a crowbar, put a hole in the ground inside the raised bed, put our PVC pipe in the hole about a foot deep, and then arch it over to the other side without the rebar. Another problem with the rebar is that if the arch is on there, that's a safety issue. So we always had to keep them covered with the arches. And by removing this, we'll be able to take those off and just, store them in better weather. But we didn't want to leave these sticking up, especially where kids are going to be. I'm clumsy enough myself. So that is going to change for us. We'll still use the PVC pipe and just bury it.
How did you do the holes went around for the pipe?
Just with a crowbar.
Or you just kind of shove it
yeah,
down?
Yeah.
just
Okay.
pound
Kinda
it
work
and
all
wiggle around and pound and wiggle around.
And about a foot deep.
Mm-hmm.
How
Is
much?
that about how you do it, Kathy?
Yeah,
At home?
I actually use a big digging bar because I like to look tough. And it does it a lot faster. They're heavy, but not too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I go exactly 1 foot. I actually have a piece of duct tape that I put 1 foot above the bottom of my digging bar. So I can do that real quick. So like a 5 by 40 foot tunnel like you saw in the previous picture, I can build that myself all alone in under 20 minutes because it just goes real quick. Chick, chick, chick.
How long is the 10 foot? Okay, I see.
And these are very inexpensive. They're less than $2.
So 10 foot. Those are 10 feet. Okay.
It's ½ inch.
And the 10 foot stretched an arch across our 4 foot band. They're 4 foot
Yes,
wide.
and we had to
So it
cut
made an
off
arch across
about
the
a
floor.
foot and a half, I guess,
Yeah.
ours with using the rebar, but we would not have wanted to do that if we put it in the ground. So we may buy some new PVC pipe for next year, but
And how many feet
very
between each
inexpensive.
PVC?
is it every 4 feet?
No more than 5 feet. But the smaller the space, the better. The smaller the distance between pipes, the better for snow load, as we found this year.
So what do you recommend?
I do 5 feet because I'm a cheapskate and I'm trying to.
We did 4.
And I have 10 tunnels well, 11 tunnels in my backyard, and so even though $50 a tunnel is less than that is cheap, still I try to save money, right?
Exactly.
But
our beds are 12 feet long and 4 feet wide, which is perfect for reaching into the middle. The kids can reach into the middle.
How much?
And every 4 feet we have an arch. And it's amazing to see the kids get out there and mark. They can do it themselves once they get the hang of it. Last year we used a fabric called Agribond fabric, and the biggest problem we had was in a stout wind. It would tear the fabric, and we'd go out there and it'd be flopping, and it would just tear almost, well, not as bad as a paper towel, but it wasn't very durable. And so Kathy recommended the Grow Guard, which you can purchase from Deerfield Supplies right here in Kentucky. And you can pass these around. It shows the different grades, and Kathy can talk more about what she recommends for the different temperatures. But we ordered a grade 50, which is for very, very cold weather, and Kathy had the 30 grade, and 34. So she shared with us, and we shared with her, and we had both of those to use throughout the winter months. And even when it got really, really cold, we doubled them up and had 2 layers over our tunnels. And we didn't lose anything through the winter months. None of the vegetables that we had established died during the winter. So, the hardest part for us was venting the tunnels and raising them when the temperatures got up on a warm day, especially a Saturday or Sunday when I'm 20 minutes away and Mr. Arnett's farther than that, and we would worry they're going to get too hot inside that tunnel because they do need to be vented. But that was really our biggest challenge with the fall garden was, closing when it got cold and venting when it warmed up. And so if you would come up and talk to them more about the specifics of the fabrics and the temperatures, because I know what we do, but she's more of an expert.
Sure. So, as Tracy mentioned and I alluded to before, the first year we did this, we used clear plastic. And if you've ever accidentally left maybe a window laying on your grass, or or some type of, that solar energy can accumulate in those structures and can fry things that are under it. And so the same thing can happen in your winter gardens. And so, especially if you choose to use clear plastic, which I kind of like to steer you away from, I want to let you know that clear plastic can easily cook your plants if you're not careful. I work full time, and I can't be home all day to vent my structures if it suddenly gets sunny. And even if it's 35 degrees outside on a clear sunny day in winter, it can get 90 in the 90 degrees in the tunnels really quickly. As a matter of fact, in my first few years winter gardening, luckily I didn't work too far away from my garden because I would be running home because I'd get out of the meeting and, oh wow, the forecast was different than what they said it was going to be. The sun's shining, and I would get home and it would be 88 degrees inside my tunnels. I'd get little thermometers and put inside there, which I recommend you do when you first start out. So I started looking for other solutions, and one is using this type of, it's called fabric row cover. It's not literally like a fabric like we think of like our shirts, like cotton. It's still plastic, but it's porous. And so it allows water through, it allows air through. So when it comes to venting, it's not so critical. When we had the polar vortex a few years ago, and then we had the snowstorms soon after, there was one snowstorm we got, I think we had like 10 inches on the ground, and that next day it was in the 50s. I was out with a shovel, like shoveling around my plastic covered tunnels because I was worried they were in their prime, and they were in their prime. It was already getting like 92 inside there by the time I got it vented. You don't want to be put in that situation. You want this to be easy, right? We've already established winter gardening is easy. And so this stuff helps make it easy. And there's different grades of fabric. if you'll see these being passed around, you can see this one here is really thin. It's going to not protect as much as this stuff down here that's really thick. But that protection comes at a cost. So we've already established that the biggest limiting factor to plant growth in winter is light. This is thicker, it lets less light through. This is thinner, but it lets more light through, okay? So really, you want to kind of find that balance, that sweet spot where you're protecting things, but you're still letting light through. And from my experience, I've found that GrowGuard 34, which is equivalent to Agribon 30, if you want to use Agribon, that provides really good protection for most of the winter. Most of the winters that we get here in Kentucky. And when we get the really extreme dips down below zero, and really, just to keep my plants looking really good, if I know it's going to be under 10 Fahrenheit, I'll go ahead and I'll throw an extra layer of the Agribon 30 or the GrowGuard 34 on top, just to keep my plants looking really, I'm selling for market. I don't want any little burnt edges to my leaves. They're still edible if that were to happen, but, most consumers don't want frost burned little edges to them.
And the picture of our tunnel in this slide, that is double layered. And that was in the coldest.
Okay.
So do you want to keep them from having any air at all?
No, so most of I'll give you just kind of like a walk through a typical winter. Ideally, in the early fall, when temperatures, we're getting frost, but it's not getting seriously cold. You're going out in the morning and it's 26 degrees. My garden is not covered. Okay? I don't have any covers on. Again, these are cold tolerant plants. And really what I want to do is I don't want to baby them. I want to toughen them up. I want to get them ready. Because essentially the way these plants withstand freeze stress is, they do some things to modify and limit desiccation. But secondly, they accumulate sugars. And that's why they taste so darn good in fall and winter too. So carrots will be sweeter. Cabbage will be sweeter. Kale is so much better. I'm not growing kale in summer anymore. I've just gotten plumb spoiled to having kale in fall and winter. It's just a noticeable taste difference and texture difference. So you want to give them a chance to accumulate those sugars and accumulate antifreeze proteins so that way when the serious cold weather comes on, they will be able to withstand it. Because essentially what happens if you baby them and you keep them nice and covered and they never really get challenged with anything cold, what's going to happen is when the really cold weather arrives and it really drops down in those structures, they're going to give up the ghost. Okay? And I saw this happen, to be honest with you, with a lot of market growers in Kentucky during the polar vortex. And this was really sad, but there were a lot of growers in western and central Kentucky that used these big structures called high tunnels. They're kind of like low tunnels on steroids. You can walk in them. Still, same principle, they're unheated, but they're big things, okay? And they had crops in there, and they were posting things over Christmas and around New Year's Eve about how great it felt to be in their tunnels in shorts. Oh, it feels so wonderful. It's like summer in my tunnels, bragging about how warm it was in there. And guess what happened when the polar vortex hit? Everything. I mean, we're talking, many of them suffered complete losses inside there. And yet I'm in eastern Kentucky where it got much colder, and I'm in these dinky little low tunnels. I mean, dinky in comparison to this expensive high tunnel. And yet my stuff made it. And because I didn't baby my plants. And so I just want to warn you about that. Don't baby your plants. Don't let your plants in those tunnels, and this is why I think it's good to get a little remote thermometer or something you can, just get some experience with to look at and watch how those temperatures can fluctuate in there. Don't let them get over 65 degrees is my target. If temperatures inside those tunnels get over 65 degrees, then I'm out there venting because I don't want to baby my plants. I don't want to push them over now to where they're thinking it's summer and they start moving those sugars back into, other pathways. So That's what I shoot for. So I don't put covers on until temperatures drop below 25 F. So when temperatures drop below 25 F, or 27, if you wanted to play it really safe, and I think that this is what I advise the school garden, 27 F. That's when you want to have covers on.
No matter how windy it is or anything like that.
No, yeah.
Now,
wind will
wind
make
chill
it
is something,
worse.
but the temperature is, like now wind chill sometimes.
Okay, so if they're forecasting strong winds, 27 degrees, I'm putting my covers on because the wind.
What if it's like a 35-degree, but wind chill is 20? You know, wind chill breaks like down to 10 degrees even sometimes.
Generally, what I go by is the temperature forecast.
Okay.
Yeah. Even though wind does factor in, at least here in the mountains, we don't get those straight line winds that the rest of the state gets. And so I know we've got some people from Louisville and Lexington that are listening in. You all might need to listen more to the wind part and the wind chill part of forecasts than we do here in the mountains. We're kind of buffered from it's rare when we get 30, 40 mile per hour winds.
Well, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Okay, like you said earlier, we had that 15-inch snow, and then the next day it was 50 degrees. So do you put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off?
So what I do for most of serious winter, and by serious winter I mean we're talking January. So, you know, there might be a few times when I need to cover in November and in late November and December. But I try to keep the covers off as much as I can. Because one, light's a limiting factor. And two, I just like to keep the plants acclimated to the cold. But once January hits, most of my garden is staying under GrowGuard 34. Okay? And it might be that rare day when we get a 60 or, you know, a 55, 60 degree day in January, I'll vent them. Because even though these are porous to air, they still will accumulate some heat.
When you say vent, you mean take the cover off?
No, you don't have to take the cover completely off. Let's actually go through.
I think we have some pictures of it. I know the one of Katie.
You're talking about on ours?
Actually, go on to mine.
She's
Go on
got it
to
right.
mine.
She's got the vent.
So I'll just show you some. This is what I'm talking about here. So in this picture,
Just one place.
just a few places, and I've just got little clips that I keep handy in my garden, and that's letting hot air out. So I don't have to completely uncover it.
So at night you cover it back up.
And so I might at night. It depends on the forecast.
Okay.
You know, again, I'm trying to minimize my work. If you can go on to the next slide. I also wanted to mention another thing is wind. What you're seeing here is 2 years ago during the polar vortex was preceded by crazy, crazy wind. And so that was with plastic cover back when I was still using plastic covers on some of the beds. And so what you'll see is I've got rope that's crisscrossed to stakes at the base of the tunnels. I highly recommend, you don't have to do it both directions, but if you'll actually back up 2 slides. Yeah, so basically what you're seeing there are stakes that are driven into the hoop, at the base of the hoop, every other hoop. So essentially what you're able to do, if you go to the next slide, and these are color-coded, red coming one direction, blue the other direction. You're just crisscrossing. Now you really don't have to do the double crisscross. We were expecting 60 mile per hour winds. That was a plastic covered tunnel. I didn't want that to blow away. I don't use plastic anymore. I'm completely using GrowGuard. It lets air through, so it's not as movable as clear plastic acts like a sail. But you definitely want to, drive that stake in the ground, every other hoop, and then you can crisscross and tie to it. The beauty of doing it, and when I say tie to, if you can go on to the next one, it's not a literal tie to. If you look real closely, I've just got it looped around. So it's tied on the very end stakes, and then I just got it looped around. If you go to the next one and click on it, that's a video there. This is my youngest daughter. She's 4 years old in this video. This is in my garden in Pikeville. And you can see here, she's just going through and she's unlooping it. And then she's able to just, when we're ready to harvest, it just real easily goes over. And we can access the vegetables that are in there. And if you'll go to the next slide, This is Vivian, who's with us today. Oh, hang on.
Hold on just a second.
Sorry about that.
Get it back. Go ahead.
But she's covering them up, and you can see that's just a real easy cover up. And here in a second, did it freeze up?
So you just go out and get what you want for that night.
So yeah, that's essentially it. Sorry. You go out and get what you want at any time. It's just like having a refrigerator out there. Everything's alive. It's just holding.
Well, the garden, I hear Tracy gave me some greens from it, and I washed them really good and dried them, and I put them in a plastic bag, and I swear, for like a week or more, they were so good and creamy.
It around. Okay, yeah, so those of you that couldn't hear the commentary from the audience talking about just how crisp and good those vegetables were out of the school garden that they had gotten for even a week afterwards, they were so good. So you can do that on a larger scale with the low tunnels. I just wanted to show you, some schools might want to do just something this simple to start out with extra low tunnels, and this is just non-wired or 9-gauge wire that you can pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot. It's the chain link fencing wire. It comes in a big long coil, and you can cut it really easily and real cheaply make yourself little hoops. And it's really good if you just want to have salad all winter long. You know, it's not going to get very tall. You don't need these big blow tunnels. You know, if you just need short structures, then you can make them out of that. Let's see. Other things about management of the tunnels. The main thing is, you know, temperature. You want to avoid it getting warm in there. Again, I use 65 as my cutoff. You might, with your experience, find something else, but certainly if you're letting it get 80 degrees inside there, you're shifting the plants to where now they're thinking it's summer, and they're not going to taste as good either. I mean, that's the beauty of fall and winter. So really, heat's your enemy, not cold. And we've talked about how thicker row cover isn't necessarily better there.
So you wait till like say 10 or 11 o'clock, and then you vent them. You don't vent them first thing in the morning.
You can vent them first thing in the morning if you need to for your convenience.
If you think it's going to be forecast is warm.
If you think the forecast is going to be warm that day, you can certainly go ahead and vent them. If you're not able, you know, many of us work.
A lot of times, I mean, the way at least the way the school garden was here is, if we thought it was going to be anything above 30 degrees on my way in of a morning, I would open those up. And then, you know, Tracy would just know her last class of the day, they'd go out and close them. You know, it wasn't an exact science.
And when do you take them off all the way?
When do I only take them off all the way if I need to do some serious work in there harvest-wise?
No, I mean, like for the season. Like, do you take them off in March?
Oh, okay. You know, of course it's going to vary. But generally, you know, really, starting about late February, I'll take them off, and there might be the occasional, you know, stretch of days there where we get serious freezes again, and I'm going to have to put them back on.
That's pretty much what we did.
Is that your experience as well here at school? Yeah, so generally the covers are on full time most of January, February.
We just pulled ours back and clipped them on the edge and left them just because we wanted them to get the full sun. And we were a little bit nervous about those cold days, but finally it's you know, warm enough. It's going to stay warm, so we took them off, and there's only been one night we went out and covered our transplant lettuce that we were a little bit nervous that might be a little bit.
And that's because we've started that as a spring crop a little bit early, and so that stuff it wasn't really ready. It really wasn't ready for cold. You know, it came out of the greenhouse.
Right.
You know, as a spring thing. It was a totally different situation.
And that's in that one bed, those peas and stuff you have.
And we did a junior high community problem solving project this year. I just want to throw this out there. With the men's homeless shelter, and the junior high students went over there and planted kale and mustard in their raised beds that they use for summer planting. We went back in April to plant cabbage, expecting those beds to be empty, and the kale bed was still full of kale, and it had not been covered all winter long. And they said they would just go out there after snow when it melted off and harvest. And then their biggest complaint was they didn't have enough recipes. They wanted to learn more ways to use kale in their food, in their meals. So we're going to do some recipe videos for them next year. That should be fun for the kids. But that was a shocker for us.
Before we move on to the next segment, last segment, there was one more question from Mr. Carter's class. They were asking, they didn't see it on the list, if okra would be a fall or winter thing, and kind of when is it good?
I wish okra was, because I like okra, but
One of the
okra's
kids was
in
asking,
summer.
so apparently it's a kid favorite.
Yeah, okra's summer, and I get one more that I get asked about a lot is sweet potatoes, and I think because people think of sweet potatoes in Thanksgiving that it might be a winter crop. Sweet potatoes are actually in the morning glory family. They're a tropical crop, so you have to grow them in the summer. And after frost hits the leaves, if you haven't harvested them immediately after frost hits the leaves, you'll lose that whole crop. So they have to really be harvested before frost hits.
So okra's probably akin to like peppers, things like
Yes.
that. They're really just not. They're really more just summer things.
They don't have the cold tolerance mechanisms. Yeah.
Okay, the next session is going to be with the students, and so I'm very excited for you guys who are here live because you're going to get to go see some of the learning extensions that have branched off from our garden projects, such as our worm farm, learning about the anatomy of a worm. You're going to get to go on a little tour of our garden. We didn't get to do as much outside as we wanted because of the weather, but if it's drizzling, they're going to take you out under the awning and they're going to point everything out to you. And we're learning about pollinators, so there's a station for making a pollinator house, and you'll learn how to do that. And also you'll get to see our video library. So I'm going to divide you into groups. If you have a child, I just want to make sure that you get in a different group from the other children, and that way when you go to the Mason Bee house, they can all use the drill without having to wait. That's something they can do if they're in different stations. So, yes, our first table is going to be Miss Sarah. She was one of the students that helped build the video library, and
while she's doing that, I'm going to jump in real quick. Those of you that are on the link session, if you'll hang out with us for just a second, we're actually going to come back to you and we're going to have a little more teacher discussion. And so that's the reason we're dividing out the group that's here. So if you'll hang with us for just a second, we're going to divide out the in-house group, and then we'll be right back with you all for a little Q&A and some discussion about as far as classroom management and that stuff works with the school garden.
okay, I'm going to put a couple of you with each student. So Mrs. McNamee, Ms. Deskins, do you all want to go with Sarah first? And then you two ladies can go with Haley, Miss Flo. Okay, and we'll keep you guys together. And you go with Ryan, and we'll do the tour first. Is it raining right now?
Yeah, I'm going to take you
Okay,
the other way.
we're going to take you out to the awning so you won't get wet. We also have some giveaways down there, and hopefully it'll be a fun time for you. Okay. Miss Tilly, do you want to stay with teacher, or you want to go see what the kids are doing? Whatever you want to do.
I think she said she's going to
Okay. I'll have you and Mr. Howard maybe go with Emily. Learn about worms first. Jackson with you. All right. Get him, and you two go with Will.
Okay.
And if you want to take the grandkids.
I think she
Oh, really? Where's the
Oh no, it wouldn't bother me at all. I'm used to that. I like having little ones around.
Okay. If you ladies want to move
Okay.
toward the middle a little bit, that way we'll help it out. There. Since that's all we've got left in here. Yeah, and we also have Mr. Hunt from Data Scene with us in here today too. Let me see if I've got the camera on you guys. So those of you that are joining us from the schools, since we have them in, if y'all want to unmute your mics because we didn't get to talk to you earlier. If you want to unmute your mic, if you all would just tell us where you're from, if you're either from a school or if you're part of education or any of that kind of stuff and you're joining this conversation, we'd love to hear kind of where you're from, and then we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to let them start us off with the discussion as far as managing in schools and that sort of stuff. So if y'all would like to tell us where you're from.
This is Lane at Letcher Middle School, and I have my students Dalton and Sarah with me. And Tracy, you and I presented at the Growing Appalachian Conference together.
Yes, I remember. Yeah. I remember. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, well, thank you. This I think kind of helped us step by step. And Dr. Raymeyer, it's so nice to actually hear from you. I wish we could meet you in person because we've heard a lot about you. So this is great. Yeah, so thanks for having us. This is cool.
Anybody else? And you're allowed to turn your cameras on as well if you want to. I'm gonna put the other computer over here so they can see your faces.
It's on us.
Well, it is until somebody else joins in. Okay. Well, we're gonna go ahead then. We still appreciate everybody being with us, and so Ms. Tackett, I believe, is going to start us off with some of the kind of how we've made it work here, and then we'll open it up for some questions.
One thing I had to learn early on is that every student cannot do the same thing at the same time, and so that meant they had to be patient on their part at times and watch other students when we were first initially giving directions and teaching them about planting. One of Kathy's great ideas was when we made the rainbow kale garden, we needed to make an arch for the seeds. So we used potting soil and spread that in the arches so that the students had a line to follow when they planted the seed. And that was very successful because it let them know where to plant, but it also gave those young roots a softer soil instead of going down into the hard dirt, and that made them grow better. So that was one of the things that we learned. And so each kid didn't plant every single type of kale, for example. Maybe they helped plant the red boar kale, and then the next 2 or 3 students planted lacinato kale, but then a few more planted the blue curled Scotch, and then we finished up that rainbow with red Russian. So they looked at all of the seeds, they compared them, then they watched the plants grow, they tasted them. They were all involved, but they didn't have to be involved in the same thing at the same time. And so if I were doing this, obviously with large classes like you are, Lane, where you've got more kids than just 6 or 7, like I have a lot of times, putting them in groups and letting each group of children do a different thing, like maybe they're one group is watering or weeding while the other group is working with compost and those kinds of things to make your group smaller. And then of course we compared all of the different plants. I wish we had been more diligent with keeping records, keeping data. At the time I was just trying to jump in and didn't plan that well enough, but I wish we had weighed the amount of seed we used and then weighed the crops that we harvested, because we fed salad to our cafeteria over 20 days this year, and it's become very popular. Even on days we have salad, if there's no kale in the mix, we get complaints from teachers and students that, why didn't you help with the salad this time?
And actually
cool to know.
And actually the last day so far that we have served salad was today, correct? Yes. It was served today, and that was from plants that we planted the last 2 weeks of August, and so those were completely overwintered plants, and we served salad today, the last day of April. So that's the part that's been the coolest for everybody to see, is how those have gone all the way from the last 2 weeks of August to the last week of April.
Yeah. But that was a big thing about management, is just dividing into smaller groups, I guess, for each task. Another great thing that we had success with is inclusion. The junior high students, where I'm able to work with students from all different grade levels at 2 different schools. We hopped on the bus one day during my class and we came over to Pikeville Elementary, which fortunately is only about a 5-minute drive. And the junior high students brought our special needs class at the high school with us, and they assisted them in planting cabbage. And this was a twofold project. Kathy was teaching those students about fall and winter gardening, just as she has with you guys today. But then those kids assisted blind students, students with autism, many different disabilities. Most of those had never, our regular kids a lot of times haven't planted anything, but for these students it was a very special day. One little girl said it was the best day of her life. And she even wrote a story about I was the princess and these royal gardeners. So that was very powerful. And if you can get your older students to mentor the younger kids, that works great, because you can't be with every single student. And if you want to bring in younger kids, pairing them up with your elders would be a great way to do that. We had lots of extended learning, and Lane, you've seen this presentation when we worked together, but just for a refresher for you, we wanted to enrich the soil because our soil had a lot of clay content, and even though we used some organic fertilizer when school first started, the more we researched how to enrich soil, it was get worms into your soil. So we started an indoor worm farm. The students started harvesting those castings, and as we've planted this spring, we've been mixing those castings into the soil, and the kids can tell you so much about that. They built their own worm farms. They can tell you all about the anatomy of a worm and how they reproduce and why they're important. And so that's been a great extension. And that's something you can do inside. And when you're dividing kids into these different groups, one group can go check on the worms while another group is weeding or harvesting. We got a composting system from our soil conservation district. If you go and present to them and tell them what you're doing, I would be very surprised if they aren't willing to help you in some way get the resources you need to make your garden successful. And they purchased a composting bin for us along with all of the hand tools that we needed. And here you can see the students putting scraps from our cafeteria into the compost. And the kids have been able to learn about nitrogen and carbon-rich materials and how to keep that balanced. The moisture level, they went out the other day and checked it and realized it was too dry, and they got all excited, and they had to get it damp again because over the winter months it had just dried out. And so that's another thing that kids can be doing to make those small groups. Our next stage is very exciting to me. We're going to be implementing a pollinator garden. It's just a weedy, unattractive area next to our vegetable raised beds. And the students are currently learning about mason bees. They're making mason bee houses, and we are planting flowers that will attract bees and butterflies. And hopefully this is not only going to beautify our school, but help kids learn about the importance of pollinators. Our art department is also getting involved in this, and we're going to make it a school beautification project thanks to Letcher County's ideas that we got from them. And we're going to be painting a mural on the wall and getting every kid in the school involved in painting rocks and just making it a pretty place to go. Writing has been a great extension, and this is another thing. If you go outside and you put one group working on their journal while another group is planting, and then you switch out, that can make your group smaller. Keeping a journal where you record the types of plants you are putting in the ground and the dates, the temperatures on those dates, illustrate. The younger kids were learning to illustrate and label, and just keep records. I know as a gardener at home, this helps me because I can't remember from year to year when I did it and what I planted, and so teaching them now to start a journal is very important. And the kids never have complained about writing, which is a surprise. We also started a video library, which is going to be linked. It is linked on our website that you can see what the kids have made as far as tutorial videos, how to build a worm farm, how to harvest castings, how to use those in the garden, how to compost, how to build a low tunnel. And these are all student created videos about things they were interested in. And they have also written newspaper articles that are going to be going into our local newspaper as a series, one each edition of the paper, starting probably next week. So they're excited about that. And this is also something you can work on during the winter months when it's too cold to go outside every day. These are some places that I have received funding, or places I think you could receive funding. Your Soil Conservation District, as I mentioned earlier. If you are in the KVEC region and can participate in the ARI mini grants, that's an easy way to get $1,000, as long as you write your grant in a way that shows you're going to share your learning and you are going to collaborate and you're going to have students doing project-based learning. Those are the things that grant is really looking for, and what is more project-based than this, growing your own food. Sustainable Pike County also helped us, so if you're a school within Pike County, you could contact them. They actually purchased our PVC pipe and the soil that we have in our raised beds. East Kentucky Pride has grants that come available periodically. If you just check their website, you might find the grant open, your local PTO or PTA. And then AEP has teacher vision grants. They're little mini grants. They're not hard to write. And just any project you have, pretty much you can write a grant for that. And I think those are for about $300 to $500, which would definitely give you the money to purchase your Grow Guard row cover, which is probably the most expensive thing we had to purchase. If you're interested in learning more about us, these are all of the blogs that have been written about us and our Twitter account. The holler, we have a school garden on the holler, and I'm pretty much the only person that posts in there, but I would really like to have some friends. So if you would go in there and post what you're doing on the holler, I would love it, because I would like to see what other schools are doing. Just like when I met Lane and we found out how they brought in the arts, or intended to bring in the arts, that really got us excited, and we're branching off in another direction with our garden from that. So if there's any questions about what we're doing or how to make what you're doing a little bit easier, I'd love to hear them.
Does anybody have any questions? You feel free to you can either type in the chat box that we have over there, or anybody in the audience that's still here with us, if you've got any questions, or if you just want to unmute your mic, you can ask any questions. We've got a few more minutes, so we'd be glad to answer anything. Some of those links that are there, I'll also point out, I just sent those out on the message box over on the side, so you can click on some of those links and you can see where, like she said, the Community Farm Alliance have done their blog post, and a link to the radio interview that they did with WMMT in Whitesburg, and also the blog post that Mother of a Hubbard, Kathy, has done, and that Henry Hunt has done with the Kentucky Data Sim Educators blog. So there's a couple really good articles out there and things that kind of encompass what we've been doing, and some videos and radio interviews and things that you can tap into. Questions?
What's a couple of things that really went wrong?
Well,
Repeat the question.
we have a question here. What really went wrong with our garden? I would say weekends was the biggest challenge, because just like Kathy said, she lived close to where she worked, and so it was easy to run home if a tunnel needed to be vented. And on the weekends, none of us who were actually hands-on with the garden were available. So we would kind of have to anticipate, should we vent, should we close, what's going to be the best risk sometimes. And that didn't happen all the time. Another thing was, when we first planted, we would need to water pretty much every day. because those young little seeds and the new little seedlings would need water over a hot weekend. And Kathy even came up a time or two and helped us with watering. But then that's short-lived, and those are very minor issues. Can you think of a problem we had that maybe I'm not?
Well, over the whole lifespan of the project, that first year, just the late start.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, not anticipating that the garden really, if you're going to have it over fall and winter, really does need to be in by these key dates. You know, again, thinking mid-November as your target date for things reaching maturity. I'm just trying to think of
that first
of
year,
the 2 years.
True, when you look at it in a 2-year time span, we got a very late start because our bed wasn't installed until September.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really know what to do with it because I had just attended one workshop, that's all I knew. And so then when I saw Kathy in our school office and said, hey, would you be willing to help me? You know, by then it was October and it was really too late to get a good start. But we did do well enough to learn that kids love this. I've never seen students so excited, and they love to eat kale. That's what we learned, pretty much.
And turnips.
And turnips this year.
Yeah, turnips we
the other-
learned this year.
Yeah, what happened that you didn't expect? What was the most surprising thing?
I think it was the turnip.
Most positive thing that happened that you didn't expect?
Well, the receptiveness of so many children, those who never ate salad at all. And now they only eat salad when our salad sign is posted in the cafeteria. They've taken such ownership in it. They're offended if one of their friends won't go try the salad. You know, they're pushing them in there to give it a sample. And just how open they were to eating anything that was out there. A big black radish that is not attractive at all, you know, but when you peel it and slice it up like an apple, put a little bit of salt on it, they are fighting each other for it. That was surprising. And to see how, like, almost this whole room was teachers here at school, to see how excited they were about getting to eat from the garden and that they want to do it at home. You know, I expect the kids to enjoy going outside and digging in the dirt. What kid doesn't like that? But for teachers who aren't hands-on with it to get excited about it, that was fun for me too.
Yeah, we know probably at least 5, 6, at a minimum, people who are starting gardens that live here in the city as well. I see some movement of plants over at Mr. Carr's classroom. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, we don't want to interrupt, but we just wanted to show, first of all, I wanted to show these guys what we could do with the Mondo pad, but also we just wanted to show you, these are some of our plants. We have just kind of a smaller size garden that I think could be converted into a winter garden very easily. So we have several things started here and just wanted to show them to you. We're so excited to learn about this winter gardening and how we can take what we're doing and make it even better. So thank you all. We're going to have to go, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but thanks for having us. This is great.
We're so glad you were here.
Mm-hmm. It was great meeting you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
See you guys. Is there anybody else? We've still got quite a few people connected. Does anybody else have any questions for us? Looks like we're about to wrap up. We've just got a few minutes left, so is there anything else y'all can think of?
I have a question.
Okay.
Why Pike County, why Eastern Kentucky leading on a project like this when much of the state is more agricultural, larger cities that probably would need to connect students more with the origin of food? Why here?
Our project started with that small garden last year, and the students were so excited that we decided to do our STLP project, Student Technology Leadership Project. Let them take a lead on this garden thing. And we thought, well, we're trying to conserve energy here at our school. And so what if we took an energy twist and let kids learn about how much energy it takes and is used to bring their food to the grocery store. So they researched where all of the ingredients to create just a simple salad, lettuce, tomato, and cucumber, I think were the ingredients. Where would those vegetables be imported from? And it became a 5,000-mile salad that cost, way more than a little pack of seeds. And so the kids started realizing it tastes better, it's fresher, all of this money doesn't go into transporting it here and the packaging, the plastics, and so they got excited about that. Just the thoughts that they could go outside and get everything they need to make their own salad. And then once we saw how excited they were, I told Kathy, we have to do this bigger. These kids are just so eager to learn, and most of everything I do is project-based learning, so I don't have a curriculum as a gifted ed teacher. I'm looking for things to get these high-level students excited, and they're so inquisitive. Anything you teach them, they want to know more and more. So that's kind of how it's grown, and that's how all these extensions to the worm farm, the pollinators, they want to know how to make the soil better. If I say something about the soil isn't rich enough, there isn't enough nutrients. And for me, it's sad that it's not happening all over the state now that I've learned what little I know, because it's really not that hard. It really isn't that hard. And it doesn't take that much time. It's not like we're out there all day long every day. It could just be something you do a little bit each week, or 2 or 3 teachers, divided up the jobs. And I can see it, even with regular ed teachers, being something that they can teach their whole science curriculum pretty much about, from plant life to the composting, microorganisms, the life cycles.
I'll throw in there too. I think that part of it, part of what got me interested in it too. Of course, I grew up on a farm, a few counties from here, and then I moved here to the city. And one of the things, the city, Pikeville, the big city, But at any rate, here we are in kind of a small urban area, and a lot of the students that we have here at the school, they didn't really have any idea where their food actually came from. You ask them, where the French fries, where the French fries come from, it's McDonald's instead of potatoes.
And that's true anywhere.
Right, exactly. And so it became more apparent when I came here, and so that was part of the reason. For years, I had been telling Tracy, we need to figure out some way to make a garden a technology project, so that way I can help out. And we can have a garden, and so we started thinking along those lines, and then lo and behold, we noticed that Kathy has this outstanding urban winter garden. And so urban meaning small space, which we've got, we have a limited area here at the school, and we realized that could be applied at any of the students' homes that live here in town, and just the fact that in the winter was the months that we were here, and it was really just perfect in order to introduce these kids that, again, may not know where their food came from, or even be introduced to some of the foods that we're growing. Most of the kids don't even know what they are.
And I'd like to add just 2 things to that. One is, about the rest of the state, the more agricultural centers. Even though we're not considered a big agricultural hub here, really we've got some things set up with our topography that makes it very ideal for growing in winter. Number one, we're at a lower elevation actually than Lexington and Louisville. And so a lot of people think mountains, it's got to be harsher climate. Well, in actuality, as far as elevation, that has nothing to do with it. That's not even part of the equation. Actually, we're at the same growing zone, plant hardiness zone, as out in western Kentucky, out here in Pikeville, in parts of Floyd County. And 2, with the mountains that we've got, it protects us from those straight line winds that really make winter gardening a challenge. Okay, so we've got a lot of benefits to winter gardening. And then as far as back to, why aren't all schools doing it? One of the advantages of doing the winter gardening as well, and I know this from my experience as a teacher, you're challenged for time. And any kind of project where it's constantly taking you back to that one project, it's like you don't want to get into it because it's going to consume so much of your time. With winter gardening, from where you're not having to be out there weeding, watching for bugs, watching for disease, constantly picking. You know, it's a slower thing. Really, in my mind, of course I'm a little biased, in my mind, winter gardens are ideal for schools because it's one of those things where you can set it up. There's that initial work of setting it up, but then really during the bulk of the school year, when the student, it's one of those things, it can be out there and you can it can be in the back of your mind. You don't have to be out there every day. You might have those days where you might have to make decisions about, you know, Friday, okay, well, what's the weather forecast going to be? Am I going to need to go ahead and vent just in case? Or am I going to need to take the covers off if it's getting to be late February?
And I think that's kind of what we experienced in that December, January, February. It really was set it and forget it. Except that really the only reasons we went out there was, like you said, once we covered them when it got really cold, we just left them covered. Unless, you know, in Kentucky, you know, we had 75-degree day or something in the middle of winter, or 80-degree day. I mean, it happens. You know, other than that, like you said, we just left it except to harvest. You know, and we were harvesting. You know, we were harvesting November, December, January, February, March, all the way up through April. You know, to this week we've been harvesting. So that's pretty much all we had to do.
But then ideally too, you know, as this thing expands, I mean, it becomes an opportunity for other teachers in the schools to use that. You know, if I am teaching about radiant energy or greenhouse effect with my students, I can take them out to the school garden and I can show them greenhouse effect, you know, right there happening. Or if I'm talking about plant adaptations, we can go out to the school garden and talk, okay, well, now we can integrate, cold tolerant adaptations. You know, there's a lot of different ways to weave the school gardens in, but yet you're not having to spend all this time maintaining them.
And math.
Oh, yeah.
If we had charted the temperatures, we had thermometers inside and outside the tunnels, and we would compare. And I mean, the kids could graph that, the data they could collect, germination rates, weighing the produce, economics. We had the high school students that were here that you saw harvest, wash the greens for the farmer's market the 3 times, weigh it, bag it, and then they went and sold at the farmer's market one Saturday morning, and they made $150. That was just one time. It was pretty much the thinnings that we needed to get out of the beds. And that was in November, one of the last farmers markets. But they got to see how the community craves this kind of food. They want it. There's just not enough of it. The people were there early. They wanted to buy out all the kale and all the mustard greens. Now, we had some pumpkins left that I had grown at home that we took to sell and some things like that. But the greens, they went quick. The green onions that we had in November, those went. The broccoli went. I mean, it was just sold out really, really fast, probably within an hour and a half. So economics, math, science, writing, technology, we have pretty much involved all of those content areas into our garden between the high school and the elementary school. And we haven't even really been trying to think of ways to use it. It's just been the things that came natural.
It's a specific follow-up to that. Since you can't just take 25 students outside because you want to, how much time does it take to make a curriculum connection in your lesson planning so that you justify this trip outside?
Well, I think there's so many things you can be teaching, just like she said in your science class. If you've been teaching all of these things, then we're going to go on a little mini field trip and we're going to observe it firsthand.
And that's really what we had with third grade too this year. They just, you know, they were talking about tap roots, and so they just made it in their lesson plan that, okay, on Friday we're taking a mini field trip to the garden. Miss Tackett, you know, pulls up a turnip, pulls up a turnip or pulls up a carrot, and all of a sudden we've got a lesson about tap roots.
We had turnips, carrots, and radishes that had tap roots, and then we compared those. 2 of those 3 are brassicas. Carrots are not a brassica. What are brassicas? You know, they're in the cabbage family. Does that mean a turnip is a cabbage? No, but it's like we're relatives. And so we talked about families and how we may be cousins. We don't look exactly the same, but, you know, we're in the same family. And those kids would see me 2 months later and talk to me about taproots in the hallway. It makes what they're learning stick.
Yeah.
Because it's real world and it's what they have experienced. And all of our learning, you know, if we've been to Washington, D.C., we can learn about those monuments and all of the history of that easier than we can if we've only heard our teacher talk about it. So I think it's just ways to make what those kids are supposed to be learning about actually make sense. Like, who would think a first grader can explain nitrogen and carbon ratios and say the word ratio and understand what it means? And they do.
It sounds like a key to this, though, is that educators have connected with parent volunteers and the community at large to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And everyone's excited about it. Like, I have not gone out and tried to get the newspaper to come and talk to me, or tried to get the TV, you know, WYNT to come and interview us. They hear about it and they're excited about what's going on. The parents are excited about their kids coming home and telling every little thing about our lessons. I had a mom the other day say, I do not want to know another thing about bees. I know everything there is to know about bees. And I'm thinking, well, probably not. But, you know, in her mind, she had heard that all of night long because the kids are excited about it. And that makes us as teachers excited when they're that excited.
Well, guys that are out there in the internet land and link, it's 5 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and sign off. And if you've got any questions, feel free to email us. You can continue to send us a message on link, or follow us on Twitter. At PlantedPES is our garden Twitter account. You'll also notice one last thing I'll throw in there is that our STLP students set up a program, a website called If This Then That. So they learned a little bit about programming and how that works. And so their little program, it looks to see what the forecasted low temperature is going to be. And so if it's below 27, it will automatically send out a tweet on our Planet PES account that says you may want to cover your winter garden because the low temperature is going to be below 27. And so that helped remind us, when we see it pop up on Twitter, and hopefully it'll help you as you begin to grow your winter gardens. And so it's just a little automated thing. It comes out every morning and says, hey, it's going to be this low tomorrow. Or now we've changed it to where if the high is going to be above a certain degree, you may want to vent. And of course now I think it's pretty much time we're going to take the covers off. So those tweets will start back up in the fall when it starts getting cool again. But that's a little plug there. So if you want to follow us at PlantedPES on Twitter, and of course our website, we keep posting pictures and the links to the kids' YouTube videos on their YouTube channel. And so we look forward to interacting with you as you plant gardens. Please start tweeting pictures to us, email us pictures, let us see what you're doing, and so that way we can stay connected throughout the process. So we'll see you all. We thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you for now. Thanks.